Not sure why we had a bit of technical difficulties there. Definitely on my end, but we are back. So I will give people time to kind of get in, dive in, and get back active with us. Yeah, because we had to cancel out that whole stream. So hopefully people will jump back on and get active because today we have such an exciting topic. And as I was saying on the previous stream, this topic was truly born out of our last session on the single life, where we discussed essentially, we were just talking about gender roles as a whole. And so, in that topic of gender roles, we kind of began to unroll some other topics. And when we unrolled this particular topic, it was like a trigger warning. So, of course, I said, man, that is a great thing that we really need to discuss because it's such an impactful part of the single life and understanding kind of how to navigate these uncharted waters or unspecified waters. So, we're going to discuss this term, submission, right? We're going to discuss this term, this phrase, submission, because I feel like in relationships, oftentimes that's where the battle is either won or lost on the left side or the right side's ability to properly submit in a way that is most fruitful and beneficial for the relationship as a whole, right? So off camera, I was discussing with Kendra, my guest today, Kendra Bethune and Rashonda Spencer. Rashonda, welcome back. Second time on the show. So I'm like a vet now at this, right? So here we are. Right? So here we are in this though. Off camera, we were talking about the word submission and how it has morphed from where it was 10 years ago to where it is today. Now, both of you all were previously married, now on the side of the single life. But I do want to know what is your, I guess, let's talk about 10 years ago, right? So 10 years ago, what was the definition? And Ken, you gave an excellent definition of what submission looked like 10 years ago. Like, can you share that with everybody on air, please?
So more like 20 years ago, when I was married, when I first was married, submission looked like my husband. He was ex-husband. He was a great provider. So he provided, he paid the bills, and I listened. He said, I listened. And it was
Right,
basically as simple as that. It was no, because he was so good with, taking care of us,
right,
it was no issue. It was no problem. It was no reason for me to basically buck his system or buck our household because he did what he was supposed to do.
right,
He made sure we never came home to lights being turned out. We never came home to, just things not going as they were supposed to go. So, my mother taught me, hey, he does what he's supposed to do. You do what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to cook. You're supposed to clean. You're supposed to take care of the kids. So submission initially was fine in our household because it was just like, hey, you're doing what you're supposed to do. So I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do.
right.
And it's no issues. So back 20 years ago, it worked. Midway through, not so much.
It's more like that blind submission, like, and it kind of feeds into gender roles, right? So there's an expectation because I checked 1 through 5, right? So because I checked boxes 1 through 5, my expectation is you definitely need to check boxes 6 through 10 and make sure they're done. And we shouldn't have to have a back and forth about it because I'm doing my part, you do your part, but it's not necessarily a team thing. It's just, hey, you taking care of it. So, like you said, hey, I'm gonna submit and make sure I do what I'm supposed to do over here, right?
Yes.
Okay, Sean, submission 10 years ago. What did that look like to you?
Yes. I mean, 17 for me too. So, and I have to agree with Ken. I think that for me, having a just like a two income household where he at that time was the breadwinner, the provider. So the bills, things of that sort were taken care of. I didn't have to necessarily be responsible for any of that, but I still
Right,
worked. And so yes, taking care of the kids and making sure the house is clean, by way of whether I did or I got it, it just got done. So I just made sure those things were done. So I do think that we share some similarities as far as submission. I don't, for me, I would say that I was submissive, but I didn't do it out of living or acting in fear of being submission, of being that. So I did it, but it was more for not out of fear, but more of just having some type of balance so that there can be some agreements done. And if there weren't agreements done, then, it wasn't a you're right, I'm wrong. Well, sometimes it was your decision was, better, or your decision was better, your thought process was better. So
Right.
we'll go with that. So I think it was more for me and for us, it was more of just what worked for us and what was the best result of what we were looking for.
Okay, so why do you all think that that definition has changed so much in today's society? Like, why is the word submission? Hey, when you talk about submission, it's almost like a curse word. Like it generates, it has such a derogatory or negative connotation with it. So, like, why do you all think that today the word submission just has such a bad rap for
I,
women? And I'm asking from the perspective
Yeah.
of women.
um, for me, I think coming out of married really young, my 20s I was married, all of my 30s I was married.
Right,
So now going into any type of relationship, the word submit is very different because I cannot imagine at this young age of 44 to have anybody tell me what to do.
Mhm.
So that's my I have a complex, and I probably need some counseling, some stuff. But for me, like you said, it is a curse word. And so when I heard it 2 weeks ago, it definitely just like struck a feeling inside of me. Like it was definitely a trigger word for me
right,
because I just see it as being older, just that you're telling me what to do.
right,
You're not going to tell me what to do because, you know, first of all, I'm grown. You're grown. I'm grown. But listening to, when you guys started to break it down, it was just kind of like when you love someone, the submission is going to come. So if you treat me the way that I'm supposed to be treated, and I treat you the way that you're supposed to be treated, I will, and I'm not there yet. I will be totally honest because of my situation, being married for a long time. Good days, bad days, but overall, to me, right now, it is very much considered a curse word because I just associate submission with you're trying to tell me what to do, and you're not going to do that.
Okay, so I'm gonna address something that Tamika Bell said. She said submission is misused. It has been a word used to control versus coming under an agreed mission, right? Which I think is also valid because if we have an understanding that we are moving in the same direction, right? And we can talk about it from the biblical standpoint because biblically, the word says that the wife should submit to the husband and the husband is submitted to God. So at the end of the day, you are all moving in the same direction, right? So that's where unilaterally we're going all going forward. You're not trying to go backwards while I'm going forward. We're all moving in the same direction, right? But where it gets sticky is you start talking about dating, right? You start talking about dating. Well, how does one submit in dating, right? Like, how do you find the balance of submission in dating without going too far left? Like, how do you start talking about, okay, well, and because a couple of weeks ago it kind of came up, and it kind of I had a lot of different conjecture in the chat because some people were saying, well, you don't submit till you get married. Well, in my mind, I started thinking, I said, well, it's impossible to wait till we get married to submit because in dating there's so many things that you have two people that have to come to agreement on, right? Like if we're going to go on a date, well, I like seafood, you might not like seafood. So where are we going to go eat? We have to, somebody's will has to submit to where what's going to make it be a good night as far as this date, right? If we're going to travel, and I like cold places. I like to be where I got to bundle up, snow, winter wonderland. You like to be where it's hot. Again, there has to be some sort of submission that has to happen there, right? Even when you start talking about visiting churches, there has to be some level of submission. So I don't. I want to, in my humble opinion, really debunk this idea that submission starts when you get married, because it starts in dating. And a
Right.
lot of times, if it doesn't go right in dating, you never even see the marriage phase. And that's just not from a woman's perspective. The man also has to submit. It can't just be, and I think this is the other side of it. You know, we're the alpha men, right? Like, it's my way. I said this. This is what it needs to look like. And that's not a partnership either. Right. So there has to be submission on both ends. So I guess in all that, when we come back to it, right now, right? 2024, right now, why do you all see it as being told what to do versus us working in an agreed space for the greater good of the relationship?
I want you to go, George. We were out there. The two definitions that you read about submission. Do you
Yeah.
still have the?
Yeah, I gotta pull them up because now I'm on my phone. But if you talking, give me a second, I will pull it up.
So basically, though both of those definitions,
Right,
it it geared towards us.
right,
Now, what you're saying, 2024 is new age,
Yeah.
but what we have been taught as women, as men in the church, outside of the church, goes back to those two definitions because it always had us as the woman doing what the man
See
is
it to do.
to do. It said nothing about us. It said nothing about we. It always said us as the women had to do what the man said to do. And so a lot of us still feel that that is still the direction of what some men still feel submission is.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't, it's not like you know, now what you're saying, I totally agree with. If I got a man, we giving and we taking, baby, I don't mind. I'm not,
right,
Right.
everybody knows I don't love to cook. I hate cooking rather. But if
right.
I have a man who loves to cook and he's cooking with me,
Yeah.
baby, in the kitchen together, I'm gonna be more willing to get in there with my man and do, not what he's asking me to do, but what
Yeah.
he's asking me to do. And I have no problem with it because it's a we thing.
Right.
Going
And
back to
you're
that,
receiving something out of it.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let me slide to the chats real quick because we're getting a lot of comments, and I keep seeing kind of this common thread about does he submit to God, right? And I think honestly, if we are absolutely being honest, that shouldn't be a conversation for down the road in a relationship. Like, if that matters to you, if his where he is with God, which it should matter, it should be priority for you. But a lot of times it's not. Like, a lot of times we're looking at so many other factors, and it's like, well, I could deal with the God side of that later. Like, we can figure out church and all that down the road. But then that's where you start to run into this error because you want to say, well, does he submit to God? Is he submitting to God? Well, why don't you know that? Because that's the first conversation. Hey, what church do you attend? Right? And I'm gonna build off of that. I'm gonna build off of that. And I may come to your church because I want to see what you're being taught, right? Because a lot of that, we are a product of what we're taught. So, like, I know what I'm taught. I sit under Pastor Georgia Matthews II. I know what I'm taught, right? And so, not to say that my dad, my pastor, is the only right pastor in the world. I'm not saying that. He's a phenomenal pastor, but I'm not saying he's the only right one. I'm saying when I come to your church, I also want to get a beat on what you're being taught, right? Because that's going to help to paint a broad picture in the relationship. So when we're talking about, oh, well, does he submit to God? Is he submitted to God? You should know that. You should know that. Hey, sir, how do you feel about tithing? Yeah, like, these are questions that you should ask. It's not, you know what I'm saying? I mean, if we can ask very personal questions in dating, you know what I mean? It's like we can ask the taboo questions, we can ask the out of bounds questions, but for whatever reason, we can't ask the questions about God. I don't know why. Like, we just fall back on asking about God. So for this discussion, let's say absolutely he's submitted to God, right? Now, how you fact check that is on you. You guys going to church together, you guys, you reading the word together. They make Bible plans that you can read. I would love to have a relationship where we share Bible plans and we read them and then we come back and we discuss it. Like, hey, what did you get out of this, right? Like somebody said, don't give a fake look in the beginning. Absolutely. Like you have people in the beginning. You have Cleo definitely on both ends. Should ask, but don't. You have people that represent something in the beginning. But if you are, let me tell you this to all those people that say that, like everybody that's saved has this great gift called the Holy Spirit that is in you. The Holy Spirit will absolutely let you know, so you don't have to try to figure it out. Like you'll absolutely know, like whether this person has a relationship. Like you know that, and then from there you make a choice, right? So when it comes to submission and all these things, I feel like kind of pour into this bowl of submission. It's like, well, I'm not submitting to them if they don't have a relationship with God, right? Or I'm not submitting to them if they have this old school definition. So how do we right all these wrongs now? Like how do we get on the right track now? How would a guy come to you now and find that fine line to where we can both balance and do this boogie together?
I think a lot of guys, and it's just been my experience. I don't know about you, John, but I have dibbled a little bit in dating. Don't go to church. That's been one of my kind of drawbacks with men, because now everybody has their own way. They think they know, they say a lot of things about, church and pastors and preaching and fake and this and that. And so for me, I've come to realize a lot of men don't go to church because they don't want to submit. Like they talk about they want to, women to submit, they want to be, the head of their household, but they don't want anybody to be the head of them. And they don't even go to church.
Yeah.
So then so in that space though, do you continue with the dating and say, all right, well, maybe down the road we'll get this thing figured out? Or because that is such a red flag, is that a closed door at the front? Like, all right, boom, you don't want to go to church because you don't submit to somebody, which that will help me understand if you're having a problem submitting to a pastor, that already lets me know you don't submit to God. I'm just telling you that
I don't know if it's
because
a red flag. I mean, I think it's important. I think it would be a concern for me because that means that again, when you go back to the biblical term of being equally yoked, if you guys are not having the same interest, especially when it comes to something that you are so strongly believing in, which is church, God, Christ or whatever. Like if that is an important part of who you are in your life, then if that other person is not willing to do an effort, then I'm not wasting my time.
so up front, if they're like, nah, I don't go to church.
I mean, not to say. I mean, that could be my way of probably introducing them to church. Just because they haven't gone, then maybe some sort or some way I can be the one to introduce them to something that's different than what they normally are used to. So they may not have found a church home that is conducive or beneficial to their way of living, or they just may have just fallen back from going to church and just have not had anyone to be there to kind of like give them the urge or the push to get back in church. So I would do my part and try to push or try to, guide them. But I mean, of course, you can't force any, adult to do anything. But if that's not like the road that they're going, and I know that that's a strong belief for me and where I'm going in my life, I don't think it's not going to be blessed.
So what's the time period? What's the time period for you right there? Cam been saying no from get go, so I know her time period is
Yeah.
0 days. So what is
Right.
your time period in that space? Like, all right, well they don't go to church. What's the
Right.
time period for us to visit church and kind of see where they are? What's the time period?
You know what? I don't know if I have a specific time period. I
Oh
think
man, you
that
got you got an
I
issue.
know. I mean, I think that I feel like once because for me, I feel like once I feel like my efforts have gone unnoticed or ignored or whatever to the point to where I have tried to get you to go there and that's just not your thing. I feel like at that point, yeah, a decision has been made. I don't know a time frame though. I give
Okay.
it I'll give it some time, but I'm not holding forever.
Okay, let me say this. And Cam, before you jump in, because I see you got something you want to say, but let me say this.
Right.
I think that you both represent where women are in society right now, right? So you have one hand, on one hand, that says, no, this is a red flag. I'm not even going to play with this. It doesn't work. I don't have to visit it. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to, none of that. It's over. And then you have Sean, that's on the other hand, that represents the women who say, all right, well, with time, it'll change. And with time, they'll get better. And with time, it'll be a little
It
different, right?
may.
Right. But
Yeah.
you don't, but when you don't have a time frame, I feel like you're just kind of back to where we started. It's just kind of like this revolving wheel. So then you're telling me that initially you are making the decision to say, I'll submit to you even though I know you don't have a relationship with God initially, I'm going to submit to you. But if the whole issue is that they must be submitted to God first, how can I submit to you? Because I got to know off top, you about to lead us in the wrong direction.
Right. Makes that makes very good sense.
I think too, church, non-negotiables for me. Church, everybody know I'm at church. If it's 4 Sundays, I'm at 3 Sundays at least. So
Yeah.
the you're laying in the bed, and
Yeah.
you're going, that's a problem for me.
Right.
Children, non-negotiable. I'm a mama. you know, Divorce wasn't in the cards, but at the end of the day, I'm a mom. So if I have somebody I'm dating and that is an issue or any kind of red flags with my children, that's an issue with me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I have learned you can't change people. The only person who can change you is you. So yes, I might rub off on somebody, but to me, George, it kind of goes back to what you talked about at the conference. Nowadays, us as women, we're so lonely. We want a man, we want this, we want that. Because of our loneliness, and we allow that to take over us, that we will settle for so many
Mhm.
things, that you begin to, okay, like Sean say, I'm gonna give you some time. But a lot of times that time reverts over to your side where you was going to church and you was doing this. Well, no, he gonna start sabotaging. Where
Mhm.
we
Absolutely.
we hanging out on Saturday night, like we just
Yeah.
had a conversation. Friday night is the best people for people who go to church, because Sunday
Right.
stuff when we gotta serve, we
Right.
over there. But you got this man that you love, and sometimes that love to me, it's more than your love for God. You don't
Mhm.
realize it, but it's happening. And
Right.
slowly but surely, they're pulling you away. They're pulling you away from the word. They're pulling you away from God.
Because I can show you other things that look good to you, right? I
Right.
can show you, like, I may not have a relationship with God, but I may be financially established, right? I'm financially established. I'm good at budgeting, like, and that's an area, that's another thing that you want checked on your list. So I can represent that to you, right? I can represent someone, i.e., Ken, you don't like to cook. I can represent someone who likes to cook and who's well versed in the kitchen. So, hey,
Yeah.
that's another box
Like
we're
your
gonna
pros
check.
and cons.
That's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
so so you're back into this give and take thing, but when you come to the area of submission, like there has to be some areas where, hey, listen, we don't bend right here,
Yeah.
right? We don't bend right here. God is an area I'm gonna always say we don't bend right there. Like that's not a bend. That's not a, oh well, we don't bend when it comes to God, because God is going to always be right. I don't care what day and time it is. God is going to always be right. That will never change. So we don't bend there. But you start talking about submission, and you have to start to, I guess, map out for you, what does submission look like, as long, well, while you parallel that with your desires and your wants, right? Because now there are two things that are coming into play. I'm going to submit on this side, but I also have things that I want. And we've got to start to have conversations instead of this, like, well, I'll check, I'll let these boxes be checked, but none of these boxes are checked. Well, if none of these boxes are checked, that's like blind submission. I'm giving into something that's going to be a problem later because I need these things right here.
Right.
I need these things, and I can't just ignore them. And I can't ignore them because you show me other things that look so good to me in the moment. But that's why my mom always talks to me about, when we talk about relationships and marriage, she always talks about like this honeymoon phase, like initially, where everything is so beautiful, right? And you have your new married friends and y'all do married stuff, you do married trips, y'all do married game nights, marriage is fun. Like that, it's all good right now. But then you start to transition into this phase where those things that we didn't address on the front end, now they're present because that blissful stage is gone and we didn't address it. So now it's like forced submission because we're married now. We in this thing now. You met my kids, I met your kids, or you met my family and I met your family. So now we're forced into this submission. And I feel like that takes us back to that trigger space, because now it starts to look like control. Versus conversations that happen on the front end. I think it's easier to submit when you talk about it. Like when you tell me why. I'll give you guys a prime example. This morning, true story. This morning I called Cam. I needed a password and a login. She wanted me to tell her the full reason of why I needed this password and login. And I said, just tell me the password and login. That's it. Just tell me. No. And she was like, but what do you need it for? I told her what I needed for. She was like, but that doesn't make sense because you got this, and this. So why do you need this? Right? So we had this whole dust up back and forth because I'm like, just tell me the password. Right? And she's like, but tell me all the reasons why you need it. Right? So this is how we're going back and forth. But I'm saying that because that happens in real life. Like her expectation was like, I'll tell you. I just want you to tell me the why. And my thing was, just tell me and trust me and know that I'm doing it for a good reason. Like I just need it. And so because those conversations, when you don't have those conversations up front, you know what I mean? When you don't have those conversations up front, and so that everybody's clear, like the password we're talking about, it was about a school laptop. Like it wasn't like her personal password. It was about a school laptop. I needed to log in on the school notebook. She didn't want to give me that without me telling her why I had the school notebook. But that's neither here nor there, right? So, but I think that that's what happens in relationships, though, in real life, because though we were able to have a conversation about it afterwards, right? And our friendship is so tight that we can just talk about things that when we go back and forth on it, right? But Tamika, I see you, right? But in a relationship, that might cause a real problem.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have a conversation about it on the front end. What are the expectations? So when you talk about submission, it can't happen without conversation.
And also with men who bring, men and women who send their representative. That's another big thing. Because like you said, the beginning phase of okay, the beginning phase of, oh man, everything's great, everything's lovely, and then when the hard stuff comes, you don't really have anything to stand on. You don't have anything to work through. You don't know how to work through stuff because y'all have never had the hard. To me, that's where the God comes in, the compromise comes in, we know each other well enough to work through stuff instead of I'm not talking, you not talking.
Right. The
the silent treatment. Like everybody, people have. I've gone through that in my past relationships where okay, I'm mad, you mad, but it's like looking forward into new relationships. That's something that's another thing, non-negotiable. Red flags. If I see dating you, small things might get to you, and then you're upset. You don't want to talk about it. You go into a shutdown mode. That's never going to work for me because communication for me is so key. And I guess being married before, there's so many things that I'm going into like, oh, I'm not thinking it's going to change. If you already presenting this right now, marriage only magnifies it times 10. So because we're now in this house together, we're now seeing each other every day, every night. It's no escaping. Whereas when I was dating you, you can go to your house, I can go to mine, where it was a little bit easier. So it's no way I would marry somebody, be remarried with somebody who I see just different red flags that it's some things that's just non-negotiable for me.
Well, let me ask you this, Ken, and Sean, you can chime in on this too, and then we'll wrap up. Let me ask you this. Cam, mute your phone for a second. I'm going to do that. All right. So when it comes to that, like you just said, the whole shutdown, right? So I'm a proponent, and let me explain why. I'm going to explain my thoughts on the shutdown because I feel like there will always be things that can be said and apologies can be made, but you never forget what was said. You can apologize all day, but you never forget what was said. So for me, the shutdown is more of, hey, I'm going to take some time, right? Gather my thoughts around this subject. Whatever the wrong was, you were wrong, I was wrong, whatever side of the line the wrong occurred on. But I'm going to take some time and get myself together so that when we talk, We can now come back and talk like adults without yelling, without screaming, without any of the other stuff that goes on. We can just talk. So for me, that's the shutdown. The shutdown is for me to be able to come back and approach it and talk about things. But I am wise enough to know that when two people are angry, no one's listening. So to
So to
talk
talk
about it
about
in
it
the
in the
midst of anger, it almost seems pointless because you're going to yell because you want your point to come across. I'm going to yell because I want my point to come across, but nobody's listening because we're both mad. So we're
so we're
just
just
fussing
fussing
versus
versus
conversing
conversing
and
and
working
working
towards a
towards a
solution.
solution. Now I agree with that, Jordan.
You-
But I'm
right.
saying in my time, 20 years ago, the shutdown was a complete shutdown.
Shut down.
For you to say to me, hey babe, I'm heated, you're heated, let's take some time and come back to it, that's not shutting down to me.
Right.
That is effectively communicating once again to me, like, hey, I don't want to say anything to be hurtful. I don't want you to say anything to be hurtful. Yes, we might disagree, but to me, that's still actively communicating, which a lot of people don't do. If you're gonna tell me, hey, we probably getting a little too, let's calm down. I can respect that. The shutdown from my day, 20 years
Was
ago,
like
was
complete
complete
ignorance.
ignorance.
Like
Like
I don't
I
like
don't
to be
like to be
ignored.
ignored.
That was
That
it.
was it.
That was
That
a
was a
stage of
stage
King,
of
like
I
like
need
I
you to
need you to
mute
when
your
mute
you
your
phone
shut
because
phone
your
down.
now.
phone's giving feedback. Go ahead,
When you
Sean.
shut down that to me and not even like come back and bend the block on it, that means that you ignored me. So now I feel like everything I said is like my feelings, nothing was valid, like it's not being adhered to, like none of that. So that's I agree with you when you said that this it was a different shutdown than if you communicate to me that hey, we need to revisit this later, then bet let's because my mouth can go there too. So yeah, we might need to do that because some stuff might not need to be said. But when you completely just ignore it and just try to sweep it under the rug and come back and act like everything is okay, and when I'm like, hey,
I
well,
agree with
what
that.
happened to this little
Yeah, yeah.
situation? Like
I
you
absolutely
you
agree
ain't
with that.
gonna bring it up. Like we just gonna act like we didn't just have a
For
whole
sure.
brawl.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
now it feel like at that point it's like you want to sweep under the rug as if it never existed. And now to me, that's when it becomes an issue.
Yeah. So I will. All right. So because we're gonna have to revisit this because now it's 12:41, 12:42. We've been on way past our time. So we're gonna have to revisit this. We definitely gonna
We
run this one
started
back.
late.
Yeah, yeah. We did. But I got it. So I'm gonna close with this, right? Because we'll run this whole conversation back at some point. I'm gonna close with this from the words of Judith Matthews, right? She would always say, "Son, life is about decisions." Right? She would say, "You make a decision to be mad. You make a decision to be happy. You make a decision to hold a grudge. You make a decision to let it go. You make a decision to communicate, and you make a decision to shut down, right? It's all about decisions. So when we're talking about submission, that is another decision. You're making a decision to submit, or you're making a decision to buck the system. I'm making a decision to communicate with you, or I'm making a decision to ignore you. It's all about decisions. And I feel like as long as we are in this phase of being single, and I don't care what the age gap is from 25 to 65, it's about decisions. And in this time period, we have to become excellent decision makers. We have to become excellent evaluators. My grandfather used to say this to my dad, and my dad said it to me: son, become proficient at watching people. If you watch them long enough, you don't even have to listen because you can see the action. You see it. You already know what's coming. Before they try to talk and point you in another direction, you already see it. So in this phase, I leave you guys with this. In this phase, become excellent decision makers. Focus on your decisions. Listen, watch, make good decisions. Hey, thank y'all so much for tuning in today. I appreciate you guys, and we will be back for another segment in 2 weeks. Sean and Kendra, thank you so much. The talk was lovely. For everybody that was active in the chat, thank y'all so much. I appreciate you guys. Be blessed. We'll catch you guys later.